Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the From Adversity to Abundance podcast. I am your host, Jamie Bateman, and this is going to be a lot of fun today. Today, we have a debate between Chris Seveney and Mark Podolsky. We are going to be debating the merits of land investing versus mortgage note investing. Chris, how are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you doing, Jamie?
This is going to be fun. I'm doing great. As a friend of mine says, the sun is shining, birds are chirping, although that's not true. So I'm doing well. Mark Podolsky, how are you doing today, sir?
Jamie, good to see you again, brother. Pulse is normal, respiration's fine, and
How'd you
I'm
sleep last night?
excited. You know what? Thank you for asking, because nobody ever asks how I slept, and I take my sleep very seriously.
You
Actually,
do. I've heard
I don't
that
want I don't
about
want this podcast to go off on the rails, but I
you.
slept
Right.
amazingly. I slept
That's,
amazingly.
I mean, on one hand, does that mean you're not nervous about this debate? I don't know, but maybe you knew you needed rest for this debate, so you went to bed early. Um, this is going to be exciting. So both Chris and Mark, for the listener out there, both Chris and Mark are previous guests on my show. So I would highly recommend you go check out those episodes. Definitely worth listening to. But in case for some reason the listener does not go back and listen to those two episodes, Chris, can you give us a 1 minute overview of your background, and particularly how it pertains and relates to mortgage note investing?
Oof, me doing anything in 1 minute, Jamie,
Right.
speaking is going to be intense. But yeah, so I've been in real estate my entire adult career, which, if you ask my wife, has been about 3 days. But really, it boils back to my 20s and 30s, where I was spending 60 hours a week in construction management for a large firm. Uh, while that allowed me to build some really cool projects, it didn't give me much else in life. So when I hit my 30s and started having children, noticed I needed to change my tune and became much more entrepreneurial. So in 2016, I started my real estate portfolio and stumbled upon note investing and love at first sight. Being an engineer, numbers, problem solving was my dream, spreadsheets for life. My portfolio kept growing and interest in investing continued, where I had people wanting to invest with me and started launching a fund. And then several funds later, next thing I know, today I run a Regulation A plus fund with accredited and non-accredited investors, where we've raised about 25 million over the last 2 years and have bought about 600 plus notes overall, and currently have about 150 in our fund, which also has about 600 investors.
Well done, sir. Might have been over 60 seconds, but that was
I was just
very
thinking like you'd have a little timer on the screen or something that counts down, like, with the red flashing when you're at a conference and the little light starts blinking to tell you to shut the hell up.
when we get started for the actual debate, I will have a timer here. But
Okay.
Mark, 1 minute for your background and how it relates to land, and how did you get into land investing, and how have you benefited? How has it brought your life abundance?
Yeah, so in the theme of adversity to abundance, the adversity was I was a miserable, micromanaged 45-minute commute to work and back investment banker, specializing in mergers and acquisitions with private equity groups. And I found a way out through the most exciting real estate niche on the planet, land investing.
Shot
There's
across the bow.
nothing more exciting than raw dirt. But what I found in doing so was this inefficient model. And I was able to replace my investment banking income through land investing in about 18 months. So I quit my job, and that was in 2001. I've been doing it full time ever since. I've done over 6,000 land transactions and counting. And I help people learn my model. And I teach people how to solve not just their money problems, but also their time problems. Because once your passive income exceeds your fixed expenses, then you can work because you want to, not because you have to.
Well done. Well done.
I
All
forgot to
right.
grab a towel so I can throw it in because
Just you tapping out.
tapping out. Yeah.
Um, All right, what we're going to do now, we're going to actually switch, and Mark's going to go first. We're going to go with 5 minutes of opening statements for Mark, and we're going to go into an explanation of what land investing is, and then if you could hit on some advantages and opportunities that are currently in the land space, Mark, and then maybe a success story or some personal experience that you've had. And I'm going to start the 5 minutes right now. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's go.
All right. So what is land investing and how do I do it? So let's use Chris as our case study. So let's assume Chris owns 5 acres of raw land where I live in Arizona. And Chris, where do you live?
Virginia.
You're in Virginia.
I
So
do
you're
own land in Arizona, by the way.
And he does own land in Arizona. So, okay, so this is perfect because he's in Virginia. He owns raw land in Arizona. And so let's assume that Chris owes back taxes of, say, $500. Okay. So he's advertising 2 very important things. Number one, he has no emotional attachment to his raw land. He's in Virginia. The property's in Arizona. And the second thing is that he's financially distressed in some weird way because Chris isn't paying his property taxes. And we don't pay for things like our property taxes. We don't value them in the same way. As a result, the county treasurer keeps sending Chris notices saying, Chris, if you don't pay your property taxes, you're going to lose that property to a tax deed or a tax lien investor. So all I'm going to do is look at the comparable sales on Chris's parcel for the last 12 to 18 months. I'm going to take the lowest comparable sale. Let's say it's $10,000. And I'm going to divide by 4. And that's going to get me what Warren Buffett would call a 300% margin of safety. So I then go ahead and send Chris an actual offer of $2,500. Now, Chris accepts it. Why? Because for Chris, $2,500 is better than nothing. In reality, 3 to 5% of people are going to accept my quote unquote top dollar offer. But for this case study, and because Chris is such a good sport, he accepts the offer. And so what do? I go through due diligence or in-depth research. And number one, I got to confirm Chris still owns that property. And number 2, I have to make sure there's been no breaks in the chain of title. Number 3, I want to confirm there's no liens or encumbrances. I also want to confirm the back taxes are only $500. So I'm going to go through this long list of due diligence, and I'm going to outsource it to my team in Jamaica. They're connected to an American title company. And while they're doing the due diligence, they're also preparing my marketing for when I'm going to go ahead and flip this property, because I'm going to sell it in 30 days or less. I'm going to make it cash flow like a rental home. So they're going to prepare the aerial map, the satellite map, the GIS map. I'm going to get images. I might have somebody, if it's an area that I'm not familiar with, for $50, go out there with the GPS coordinates. And I want to know, what's the road like? How far from the nearest services? What are the neighbors doing? Are they dumping anything out there? Right. So let's assume, though, that everything checks out. And I go ahead and send Chris a check for $2,000. I send the treasurer a check for $500. I own it free and clear. Now, if I was investing more than, say, $5,000, I just would close traditionally through a title company. I wouldn't take
90
any
seconds. 90 seconds.
So that's it. Now, I own the property. Now I'm going to sell it in 30 days or less, because I'm going to sell it to the neighbors. Now, if the neighbors pass, I'll go to my buyers list. The buyers list passes, I'll go to Facebook, buy sell groups, the marketplace, and then I'll go to lands, landmodo.com, landandfarm.com, landsamerica.com. But the way I'm going to sell it is I'm going to make it irresistible. So all I'm going to ask for is a $2,500 down payment, and then I'll make it a car payment, say $297 a month and 9% interest over the next 84 months. So it's a one-time sale. I get my money out on the down payment, and then I'm getting $297 a month for the next 84 months and 9% interest, no renters, no rehabs, no renovations, no rodents. And because I'm not dealing with a tenant, I'm exempt from Dodd-Frank, RESPA, and the SAFE Act, all this onerous real estate legislation. So then the game that we play is, can we create enough land notes where our passive income exceeds our fixed expenses, and then we are into abundance. And we're working because we want to, not because we have to.
Wow. That is right on 5-minute mark. You had about 10 seconds to spare.
I'm just ready
all right.
to like end. Can I go home now?
I'm not even part of the debate, and I feel the same way.
Mark,
luck,
where's the
Chris.
link to your training? Like, can I sign up today?
All right. Chris,
Yes.
you ready?
I'm ready.
Explanation of mortgage note investing, and then advantages and opportunities in the mortgage note investing space, and then maybe a success story or personal experience. You ready?
I am ready.
You have 5 minutes. You are on the clock.
So mortgage note investing is, most people actually never heard of it, but everyone is always involved in it. Because when you buy a house, most people finance it. And after you finance it with the lender, many people get a letter in the mail that says, now send your payments to this person. When that happens, your mortgage has just been sold. And residential mortgage note investing is about a $16 trillion industry, to give you the size of this industry. And what we do is, you're buying the loans on the secondary market. So lenders who originate will turn around and sell loans on that secondary market. And we like to purchase those when they're in default, or when borrowers are behind in their payments. We all probably know somebody who's missed a mortgage payment. Now, contrary to popular belief, most people have it set in their mind that, oh my God, if I miss a payment, the sheriff's going to come kicking in my door and rip me out of my house, and I'll be foreclosed upon in 30 days. Our average default on our loans is about 3 years, to give you an idea of how long people have been behind on those mortgages. And we purchase them at a discount from banks, private parties, hedge funds. And by purchasing it at a discount, it allows us to focus our strategy, assessing the risk on each note and the return, by factoring in what we call the 3 Ps, the property. And like Mark, we do the same due diligence that Mark did. So thanks, Mark. Save me a minute from repeating all that due diligence. We'll also, the title reports, taxes are owed. We want to make sure those are all paid. We'll look at the person. We've seen people who have a 17-page rap sheet, or they filed bankruptcy 6 times. Not something we want to deal with, because our goal is to keep these people in their property and work with them to keep them in their home and create passive income. And last is, we look at people's predicament. Most people just don't wake up one day and say, oh, I'm not going to pay my mortgage today. People, death, divorce, job loss, medical. Now, people go through hardships all the time. And 60% of Americans live, unfortunately, paycheck to paycheck. And with what everything costs today, it's probably even higher. So we'll buy a mortgage from a lender. And I'll give an example of a $100,000 loan. We purchase it for $60,000, and the person's living in the house. And we like to focus on loans that are like 10 years old, because what has happened in the last 10 years? Property values have appreciated significantly while they paid down their mortgage a little bit. So we like properties that have equity, because the 2 ways you can exit a mortgage is either through the borrower or through the property. Which through the borrower is, we're trying to get them on a revised payment plan. And by getting, so they might be $15,000 behind. A prior lender is just going to say, give me $15,000 or else. We'll say, give me $5,000 and start making your payments again. And we'll modify the loan. And then we'll sell that, not in, unfortunately, 30 days like Mark can do, but in 8 to 12 months. And if we bought it at 60 cents on the dollar, we can turn around and sell it at 80 cents on the dollar, while also doing the good of keeping somebody in their home and focusing on, that strategy. There are times when, unfortunately, we have to foreclose on a borrower, and then we have that real estate, that we still have that asset that is still in demand, that somebody can look and turn around and sell.
You have about 1 minute.
Okay, some of the advantages are we acquire them at a discount. We can buy on the secondary market where we're not originating a loan today. That's a $300,000 house and a 270 mortgage. Our $100,000 mortgages today are probably worth 300,000. So we look at it as a lower risk. There's always risk in investing, with that significant equity. And also, I'll use it that people love real estate. If you can show somebody a picture of a house like, ooh, I own the loan on this, or you drive through any city, who owns the tallest building in that city? It's a bank. And at the end of the day, Mark's a bank, I'm a bank. It's just how we become the bank. But both at the end, we are the bank.
Oh man, 15 seconds left. You guys both ended right at 15 seconds left. That's amazing. Yes, so both of you can become the bank. Mark, you're on mute. You may know that.
I say I love it. I want to get Chris's fun doc.
Absolutely. Wait a minute. We're not supposed to be friends here. We're not supposed to get along on this during this debate. That was really good. All right. So round two is going to be rebuttal and counter arguments. So Mark has 5 minutes to respond to Chris's points, and you're going to present counter arguments. Specifically, Mark, you're going to address any misconceptions or weaknesses that you see pertaining to mortgage note investing, and then highlights strengths of land investing when compared to those downsides of mortgage note investing. Questions?
No.
All right, 5 minutes, sir. Here we go. You're on the clock.
Okay, so I love the model of mortgage note investing. Number one, just like land investing, you're making your money on the buy. Number two, it's backed by an asset that's appreciating, most likely. And he's got a seasoned note, he's the bank, and he's got tremendous deal flow. So he's got a market that's as big as his capital, essentially. Where do I not like it? It's hard to dislike, because in the realm of other investments, let's just pick on, I don't know, what's sexy? Where can I make 25 to 30% on my money?
Short-term rentals.
Short-term rentals. So let's look at short-term rentals, right? So short-term rentals, you've got lots of economic factors that are going to, either improve that market or could crush you, essentially. And it feels more speculative than, say, mortgage note investing, which again is more investing because you're making your money on the buy. And so to me, the risk reward ratio of a mortgage note fund, if I could put $2 million in there and make 200 grand a year in this fun, boring little mortgage note fund, you got my money.
SeveneyInvestments.com or LabradorLending.com.
So I can double.
Right.
So, you basically would call it the double your money fund in 7 years. And to Chris's point, everything has risk, but again, it just has very little risk.
Okay,
So I would say that the only advantage I have is that we're not using any debt when we buy these properties. So we're debt free in that sense. We use no leverage. Again, we're making our money on the buy, but we have an inefficient market. So it's a little sexier because our margins are 300 to 1,000% when we're making our buy. Because the great thing about land investing and the terrible thing about land investing is no one knows what the land is worth, because you can't go on the MLS or Zillow and see 2,000 transactions in this marketplace. It's just very inefficient. It's and the comps can be or the comparable sales can be all over the place. So I think what we have is the best passive income model in the sense that you've got this one-time sale, you get passive income every single month. You don't have to deal with any renters, you don't have to deal with any rehabs, you don't have to deal with any renovations, you don't have to deal with any rodents, and you're not dealing with any real estate legislation. And so it's not competitive either, right? Like you couldn't think of a more boring real estate niche. Like I think mortgage note investing is pretty boring. Raw land investing is even more boring because it's dirt. Like you won't go on HGTV or the DIY network and say, flip this land. The before picture is raw land. The after picture is raw land.
It's raw land. 1 minute, 1 minute.
So I think that because we're not using any debt, and because we're making our money on the buy, and because we're getting this passive income every single month, and because there's no cost of foreclosure, and because we don't have to deal with the emotional risks of a tenant during due diligence, it is the best passive income model in that sense. So I'd be curious what's better.
All right.
Bitcoin?
What's that?
Bitcoin?
you
Yeah.
said.
Meme stocks?
Yeah.
You know.
Meme stocks.
I'll save my summary or clarification for after Chris goes, because I do think there were a couple of things you highlighted that are we can point to about land investing that are not found in mortgage note investing. But I don't want to step on Chris's toes. Chris, you are going to have 5 minutes to do a rebuttal and counter argument. You're going to address any misconceptions that there are out there about land investing and highlight strengths that mortgage note investing has when compared to land investing. You ready?
Yep.
All right, let's do it. You're on the clock.
I think some of the misconceptions about land investing is that you have to spend a lot of money up front to find these properties and parcels, which is not truly the case. If you get a system in place like Mark has, it can be done very efficient and effective. Another misconception I think a lot of people have about the land is the quality of the borrower in regards to, oh, it's somebody who's just, doesn't have the money or isn't qualified that just wants to have it. There's a lot of high net worth people who are just looking to buy land because land is something that we don't create more of, unless you're in a coastal area where to get rid of some and add in some. And also the other aspect that I saw a really interesting stat that blew my mind was on that seller financing component that Mark does with land. The average down payment's like 25 or 30%. I mean, it's pretty substantial, where a lot of times people will sometimes market it as, oh, I'll sell it for $0 down and so forth. They may be getting it at a very low price and getting that type of deal. But when they go to sell it, they're very sophisticated in understanding how to structure that. Some of the other aspects with notes and kind of some of the pros that, some people view this as a con, but I also view it as a pro. As Mark mentioned, we've got RESPA, CFPB, consumer protection. You have all of this rules in place. The good thing about that, though, is it gets out all the riffraff, or the majority of it. There's still some, we know some, but it gets out. So it does sometimes limit the competition for people who want to get involved because they're too intimidated. The other aspect of notes, especially us, where we like to buy non-performing, is it is a conflict-oriented business. And if you try and work with people, but also you have to understand it's a business and it's conflict-oriented. I came from that background. So for me to call an attorney and say, hey, we got to do this. Let's send a demand letter. Let's get the process rolling. Meanwhile, we want to work with them, but bring them to the table. But sometimes you got to push or pull a borrower, unfortunately, to get them to come play. That intimidates people. I know somebody right now who's been actually a land note that went non-performing that I'm like, wow, it's in Texas. file the foreclosure on the guy. Just get it over with. Well, he's been telling me for 4 months that he's going to pay me this. And I'm like, start the process at least. You can always push that date. So now one of the things that I'll mention, again, land versus notes, where it's similar, but I think honestly, land has the advantage is when Mark talks about the value. Now, it's very difficult to get value of land. It's very difficult to get a value of a property because we don't get to see the inside of the house. We can't go as a lender. I don't know any lender that will allow you to knock on the door and say, "Hey, can I come look at the inside of your house?" So we don't know what these houses look like. I've had deals where, I mean, we could be on episodes of Hoarders, and the loan would have made more money being on Hoarders from the TV rights than it would have been from the amount of money that we spent $12,000 to pick up all the trash out of these properties. I will refute one point, Mark, though. I bet you I have land in Florida and Arizona that probably both have snakes. So they don't have rodents, but they have snakes, which I'm not sure which one's worse.
Yeah, but if we're going to debate, I will say there is a market for snake hunters. I've actually had somebody call me and say, "Hey, does this property have snakes on it?" I'm like, "Absolutely, like great."
I'm going to digress and take a minute. I know a guy who breeds exotic snakes and gets like 50 to 100 grand per snake. And this guy's rolling in 7 figures a year by having snakes breed in his basement. And you want to talk passive? That's all this guy does. And I'm sitting here buying notes and doing borrowers, and he's sitting next to me at a table, and I'm like, "Are you serious?"
We'll have to have him on the next episode.
Exactly. One other thing that
30 seconds
I'll mention is, notes and land. I will say again, back to land, is you can get involved in land at a much lower price point. Notes a few years ago, you could start 10, 20,000. Today, that's probably bumped up to 25 to $50,000 entry point, which again is a positive sometimes because I don't have I'll call it uneducated people overbidding for stuff or flooding the market with overbidding on stuff. We still see it, but sometimes you might see that issue areas where it's a lower cost of entry, you might have more competition.
Time is up. All right. Well, there's a lot to dive into. We've got one round here where we're just it's a little more free flowing. I'm gonna ask some questions. That was really good. Then the reality is we know there's pros and cons to both sides, and look, they're both pretty similar. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you guys on is because, I do run in the mortgage note space more than the land space. And so from my perspective, I don't know if it's because I've gotten to know Mark more over the last couple of years or what it is, but I've started to see more and more land notes and land investors, and just, it seems to be, more popular. And so I've come across in mentoring people will kind of be at that crossroads of which one of these two should I choose. So let's start there in the Q&A session. First to Chris, if you have a new note investor, we know there's no right or wrong answer here, but new note investor, they come to you and they say, "I'm not really sure. Should I get into land?" Or I'm sorry, new investor, new real estate investor. They've got a little capital to spend and they've got a lot of time. Should I do mortgage notes or should I do land investing?
Great question. I usually will push people more towards a note in a performing loan. And one of the reasons why is with the mortgage note, it's okay, there's a property, the property can be there. You can get a little better, probably valuation on it. One of the concerns I have with some, and Mark can answer this much better than me, but some of the land deals that I've seen people put out there recently have been swampland, unbuildable, doesn't meet zoning requirements. So trying to understand some of that due diligence can be challenging. And and if you need to sell a mortgage note, I think it might be a little bit easier to sell a mortgage note backed by a physical piece of real estate than it is a land note. But Mark's done 6,000 of these, so I know he can, probably provide more insight. This is just kind of what goes through my head. But again, I'm
Absolutely.
not in that space. So Mark
Yeah,
can
Mark,
answer a
let's
little
throw
bit
it
more.
over to you. Same question. New real estate investor, got some capital to put to work. They have lots of time. They're debating the merits of these two, and pretend you don't have your own system, that just pretend you're not biased here. Which direction do you point them into?
I- It's hard not to be biased.
Fair.
It
Fair.
really is, because
I'm
Well,
biased.
well,
So
look,
me
there's
too.
okay. Let's
Yeah.
forget that. Let's be real.
And the
There's
only
a
reason is because, like Chris had mentioned, I can buy a piece of land for $500 or $1,000. And if
Mhm.
I'm brand new, I
Yeah.
can just dip my toe in the land investing water,
Yeah.
and for a minimal amount of capital, test it and create a note.
Sure.
To Chris's point, you can't do that in note investing. But
Right.
also, to Chris's point, kind of a good thing, right? Because you have a more reputable sort of marketplace, if you will, because of all the regulation, because you're going to attract a more sophisticated person into that space. I mean,
Sure.
look, my mom thinks I'm great, but you can tell talking to Chris, he's way smarter and way more sophisticated than I am. So if you're looking to, work with an operator, that's the kind of person you want to work with. So I would say, I would say, like, if you want to do note investing and you're going to dip your toe in the water, just write Chris a check and do that
Right.
instead of, figuring this out on your own,
Yeah.
and carry his briefcase for 6 months and do that. I think that's
Yeah.
actually less risky than any other play
Mhm.
you could go with. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Chris wants to chime in.
I was just gonna joke. I tell Jamie I'm just a dumb Pollock, Mark, who does this. So Podolsky probably, it might be a little Polish in there too. But one thing I'll say, I like what you mentioned about like the $500 though, because if you lose $500, it's $500. I would think, because people always ask this question, like with mortgage note investing and versus land, I would view land investing easier to scale than mortgage note investing for three reasons. One is the lower cost of entry. The second is your turn ratio. If you can turn these things like you are, I buy it, I get somebody down payment, even if it took you 6 months to do that process. The mortgage note life cycle on average is 12 to 18 months. And like you said, it's a higher cost of entry, where if I could buy 20 land notes for 1,000 a piece versus one mortgage note at 20,000, you're reducing your risk, but also if you could turn those, so I would look at the land side of things. From if somebody's like, hey, I want to quit my job in a period of time, if they're sophisticated and sharp, and understand kind of the metrics, and again, cut you a check to learn how to do it, based on the training that you had, which has had I don't know how many tens of thousands of students. I would think the land is something that you can scale up much quicker and get cash in the door faster than mortgage notes.
I'm starting to think in 6 months we're going to have you both back on, but you're going to be on the other side. You're talking yourselves into switching sides here.
It's funny because I literally Friday. So the way I invest in land is kind of backwards a little bit. Of I buy defaulted paper that's on land, and I usually get that at a significant discount, because what Mark just said, just like the borrowers don't want it and you'll write them a check for 2,500, I will basically buy that land note very cheap, go through the foreclosure process, just get it wiped or whatever, take ownership. I just took ownership 25 acres in West Virginia, and I'm sitting there thinking, wow, this would be a good one, because I know it would be a good place for a hunting cabin. And I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, I'll sell or finance to somebody on a hunting cabin.
Hmm.
And then instead of owning it, just sit there and collect that cash flow. I've got 3 properties in North Carolina, 1 in Arizona, 2 up in Oregon, I think. So I've got like 15 properties. So I can't sit here and dish land
Bash
investing
land.
when I've got about
Yeah.
15 properties that are just sitting there. Eventually that I'll probably turn around and look to sell or finance.
So
yeah,
this is gonna be a little bit this question is going to be a little bit less of a debate question and more just educational. Um, to Mark first, since you've gotten into the land investing space, it's a two-part question. What has changed in the marketplace and just the conditions overall? What has changed since you started to now? And what do you see changing in, say, the next few years as far as land investing goes?
So what I've seen change is it has sort of broken through. Where it used to be, if you went to a RIA meeting and there's 100 people in that room, 99 of them would be landlords, wholesalers, and house flippers. Today, you might have 5 or 10 land investors in there.
Mm-hmm.
So there's more people sort of seeing the benefits of raw land investing. In raw land, it's such a big market. I mean, it's just massive. So, there's billions of acres of raw land available in the US, and it's inefficient. And you can, like Chris was saying, like there's all these little niches you can play. You can put like hunting land, or you can do hip camp stuff near national parks. There's just, you can do infill lots. You can do development deals. It's just a massive market. Like mine's it's like the long tail of real estate. It's just like the simplest thing to do is buy rural land, 25, 30 cents on the dollar, flip it and make a cash flow. But there's other things you can do with it.
Mm-hmm.
So what has changed then is technology. Like it used to be like I was walking uphill both ways, right? In land investing. Now, to get a list and use the analytics like a data tree and price my property, it's so much easier. The technology, I mean, mapping, we did a development deal in Tennessee, and using drone technology to map it. And it's just incredible, the technology today. And now for marketing, I don't even I use inexpensive virtual assistants, and they use Chat GPT or Claude.ai to write our marketing ads. So things have gotten better in that sense. What I think the future is going to be, I think everything's going to change. That's how Jeff Bezos' question. So if everything's going to change, everything's going to change. What's not going to change? I think what's not going to change is people will always want a real asset, and they'll always want a good deal. And if those two things remain true, I think I'm in a good niche.
Got it. Great answer. Chris, same question. What has changed since you've gotten into the mortgage note space, and what do you think the future holds?
Yeah. First, I want to just touch upon what Mark said about like land investors. When I was at Note Expo last year, the number of people who were doing land there were more people doing land than notes. And I'm like, oh, wow. But a lot of them were like in Texas, and what they're doing is buying large parcels, subdividing them, bringing utilities in, and then seller financing where people come in and some of them would buy the trailers. But I mean, like Mark said, there's so many different aspects of land investing, just like there is so many different aspects of note investing. Technology, agree 100%. Data tree, prop stream. I joked to my wife, I need to get an Oculus Quest to use Google Street View, where you can put the Oculus on and now use that to turn your head and look at the neighborhood. There's an app on there too. So if anyone's looking to get an Oculus, just blame it on your investing needs it, not that you want to be a kid and play Beat Saber or whatever it is. But technology has definitely changed. I think what's changed though the most in the mortgage note space has been the government regulations that have happened. We raise money from investors, and the first thing people ask, oh, is it like 2008? 2008 is like the internet from 1997 in mortgage note investing, where it was dial up, not much. I mean, so much has changed where there's so much more restrictions and safeguards in place, which again has been good and it has been bad. It's been good because now you have to be a little bit more honest to be in the space. Again, there's still always bad players out there, but it does make it more challenging for licensing and some of these other things. The other major change, again, we've seen is just like everybody has seen in real estate, is pricing increase, supply and demand, and less supply, more demand. The government printed $6 trillion that made its way to people, and people are sitting on cash. They want to spend that money. So that is caused, like, non-performing loans. I was looking at an asset that 6 years ago I could buy for 35 cents on the dollar. Today, that asset would sell for about 70 cents on the dollar. Now you can still make money, but what it's caused is very similar to what's happened in traditional real estate, whether you're a landlord or a multifamily guy. The joke has been, you could have been out on a ship in the middle of the ocean for the last 4 years and made money on the deal because of appreciation. That's gone. It's all about management. What Mark mentioned earlier, buying it, you got to buy it right. And you got to have that education and experience. And the people who don't have that knowledge, who is it? Warren Buffett said, the wave goes back or whatever. You see, I forget whatever.
See who's swimming naked.
See you swimming naked, essentially.
Yeah.
You're really starting to see that in every aspect of real estate, including mortgage notes, for people who were buying loans that were originated at 3%. The borrower's 8 months behind, and they're like, oh, I'm okay paying, 70 cents on the dollar for this. And I'm like, great, you just bought basically 5%. You're making 5% with a borrower who pays once every 3 months, compared to I could have had that thing in a CD at 5%. And it's just because they don't understand the numbers.
And it's tough to modify a 3% loan, right?
Yep.
Not a lot of wiggle room there. Awesome. That was really good. So I'm just going to hit on a few points you both made, and then you can talk more about what you have going on today and how that can benefit the listener before we get out of here. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Cool.
A couple of things I think were interesting is that, several of the things you both highlighted can really be seen as pros or cons. So, like the low barrier to entry, that can be good, that can be bad, right? We talked about that. I'm not going to beat it to death, but also the regulations. I mean, that can keep people out, which can be hard for the new note investor. They don't know if they need to be licensed in a particular state. Do I have to use a loan servicer? Like, there's a lot of like red tape that's scary. But to Chris's point, that keeps out the riffraff a little bit. So, and another point, I think you touched, Mark mentioned this a couple of times, you're not dealing with the emotional attachment of the borrower. But to Chris's point, that emotional attachment means you can work with the borrower potentially and create a loan modification and then sell that loan for a greater value if you're not exiting through the property. So it could be good, it could be bad, right? It kind of highlights the upside and strengths of both land investing and mortgage note investing. I'll give you each 30 seconds, and then after that, we'll talk about what you have going on today. Mark, final thoughts, land investing versus mortgage note investing.
Yeah, my final thought is that land investing versus note investing, I think that it really just depends on you as well. Look, nobody wakes up and thinks to themselves, boy, I need some raw land today. But we all need a place to live. That's just true. That being said, if you look at what we own, 99% of what we own in life, we don't need. But we all do need a place to live. So I think that there's something very intrinsic and special about that in mortgage note investing. But when it comes to the simplicity, the numbers, the lack of regulation, the low barrier entry, I think that for me, land investing is the winner in the debate. But all right, I'd be curious what Chris has to say.
Yeah. So I gave you some extra time. I'll give you 60 seconds, Chris. Go ahead.
Yeah. At the end of the day, we're both the bank. We're both the bank. We both don't have debt. We are the debt. We're both building cash flow businesses that are building wealth over time. It's not a get rich quick scheme. You're building those monthly payments. Now, it really boils down to, what's your ego? You want to show people a piece of dirt, or do you want to show them this beautiful $15 million property that I have in Miami that has, basically the swimming pool, a tub made of one piece of stone that was carved out, they could say, "Oh, I was affiliated with this." You know, just like my back days when I was in construction management. "Ooh, look at that 24-story building. I built that. That building's always going to be there. That house is always going to be there." So there's no right or wrong answer. At the end of the day, we're really both doing the same thing. For me, it's more of an ego thing, honestly, of I like to look at the piece of property because I think that's sexier. And as a civil engineer, I do love dirt. I learned my degree was dirt and water is mud. So I was one of the theses that
Nice.
we had to finish. But again, both of them really are the same business plan. It's just slightly different asset class, and both of them can lead to long-term wealth.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely correct. There's so many strengths to both mortgage note investing and land investing. And for the listener, that's why I wanted to have these two guys on, because you two are two of the most successful people in these two spaces, or even this larger space of real estate investing. So I thank you both for coming on. Mark, why don't you tell the listener what you have going on today and how that can benefit them?
Yeah. So I've got a lot going on today, for sure, but more of the same. I'm helping people solve their money problems, their time problems by creating that passive income. And so if you're in a lousy W-2 job and you're looking for a side hustle and you want to start building passive income, then go to thelandgeek.com and learn more there. And I've got Dirt Rich 2 coming out soon, how to scale your land business without missing a beat. So I'm excited about that book. And check out the podcast, The Art of Passive Income, which I should have you and Chris on as well. I never had you on, Jamie.
Yeah,
but
I'll come back if you have me on.
yeah.
What's your ideal client avatar? What does that person look like?
So I want to help everyone along the economic spectrum. So if you have more time than money, I've got free material for you. If you're, an accredited investor and you're rich and you want to be wealthy, I have a done for you program. So, and everyone in between. And so I just want to help people really live their best lives, because I think that once we have that passive income and we don't, we can eliminate that big bucket of stress in our lives called money, we can really move up Maslow's hierarchy of needs into self-actualization and do what we really want to do in life.
And get that nice sleep like Mark had last night. All right, Chris, what do you have going on with your company and your fund, and who's your ideal client that you want to serve?
Yeah, so we continue to, raise money for our fund, which is open to both accredited and non-accredited investors. One of the interesting things I'll mention about our fund that does make it unique is investors get a 1099 dividend, not 1099 interest. So good tax bonus there for them. And, we structured it with a minimum investment. It's only $5,000. And we really target focus. I'm a big acronyms person. GOATs, Henrys, which a GOAT is getting old and tired. So that landlord who's like, I don't want to do this anymore. As my wife says, we go on vacation, we go to a water park. I want the lazy river. That's what most people want nowadays, especially with what's going on in the markets. We want the lazy river. Then the other is the Henrys, high earning, not rich yet. They don't qualify for accredited, but they have some money sitting on the sidelines and they want to invest in an institutional type product like mortgage notes, but they've been left out because you have to be accredited. You need $100,000 minimum, which to anybody, even myself, you, Mark, $100,000 to anyone's a lot of money to give somebody, the first time, as you're trying to start investing. So we want to really focus on that individual. And a lot of my team are millennials who, are trying to buy a home or just trying to get passive income, because 401k, that 40-40-40 rule that I like to say is 40 hours a week for 40 years for 40% of your income is not going to cut it. And people have to invest and look at passive income as a means to allow the experts to work with them to let you live the lifestyle you want. And the one thing that I know Mark is a big proponent of, there's one thing nobody can buy, and that is time. We can't buy more time. So you got to take advantage of all your time that you have.
So good, man.
So good. Can I steal all of that?
Um,
So good.
Absolutely.
I will release the licensing rights for the small fee of.
Of
But you know what's so great about
Mark's
those
honor
licensing
arguments.
rights is I know you'll owner finance me.
Exactly. I will.
That's right. I love it.
I actually have I joke because I actually have a most people would joke because it's like, oh, a timeshare, why'd you buy? I have a timeshare that we used a lot and it's actually done very well for us, and we're like, we don't have much time to use it anymore. So I looked to sell it, and it's on an island, and basically I told the person like, hey, I'll seller finance this thing. And all of a sudden you say seller finance to that, you get 4 weeks out of a year and stuff, so you get a month, and all of a sudden people are like, oh yeah, like, because they don't have to come up with that large payment. You seller finance that thing to them. And most people, again, don't understand or have done seller finance. And they're like, oh, the amount of people who have inquired now that when I said seller finance has gone from 1 to probably 15x.
So many creative things you can do in this space, and it's fantastic. Chris, did you mention where people can find you online or how they can contact you?
Yeah, they can go to our website, 7einvestments.com. That's the number 7, the letter E, like behind me, if people are watching on video, investments.com.
Mark, I think you mentioned your website. Any other contact info you want to plug?
No, I'm good. TheLandGeek.com.
Fantastic. Chris, Mark, this has been really, really fun. I've enjoyed it. Hopefully you did as well. And I know the listener will as well. This has been really, really good. And like we said, there's pros and cons to everything. It really depends on your situation. The one thing I'll say is just because there is a low barrier to entry in any particular asset class or investment strategy doesn't mean you should just jump in with, head first. Talk to Chris, talk to Mark, talk to other experts in these spaces, understand what you're getting into. But absolutely, both of these investment strategies can take you eventually in the long term from adversity to abundance. And speaking of that, check out our website, Adversity to Abundance, the number 2, adversitytoabundance.com. And like Chris said, we can't make any more time, and we appreciate you spending your time with us because that is your most valuable resource. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.